Hi, Calvary kids. We are starting a new unit this week. Let's start with a little refresher. Does anyone remember the name of the man God used to lead the Israelites out of Egypt? Moses. Good job. But although Moses led the Israelites to freedom, he never did enter the promised land. Do you remember who led the Israelites into the promised land? We used a water experiment to talk about this one. Joshua. We then looked at a period of time in which the judges led the Israelites. This was a bumpy time period for Israel. Though they had conquered the promised land, they kept falling away from God and needing the judges to help them come back to God. Last week, we looked at a story of Ruth, who was faithful to her mother-in-law and to God. And this week, we are going to look at another family who showed faithfulness to God during the turbulent time of the judges. Let's get ready to move through this story. Find a seat where you can see the screen and sit crisscross applesauce. Ready, set, go. Okay, perfect. Where do you think we left our telescopes? I think mine was over here. No. Well, then maybe it's over here. No. Oh, it's right there. Put your hands over one eye and close the other, and let's see who we're talking about today. She's coming into focus. Ah, there she is, Hannah. Grab hold of something as we fly into the Bible story. We made it. Hop up and feel around where we are. Where are we? We are in a tent-like building where there are lots of curtains. There's a lot of people praying here. Remember, we talked about this a couple months ago. It's the tabernacle, the place where God connected to his people before Jesus came. We bend forward into a tent-like shape, like a tabernacle. And then we come forward onto our knees into a prayer position, like a woman named Hannah. She's praying and praying, Lord, if you give me a son, I will dedicate him to you. He will serve you all of his life. A priest named Eli, who walks in wide steps because of his clothes, approaches and says, is there something wrong with you? Hannah explained, I've been pouring my heart out before the Lord. Eli says, go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him. Hannah and her husband, Elkanah, return home. Let's find out if God answers her prayers. We need to crawl forward through the Bible a little. Come down onto your feet and hands, put your head up and crawl sideways. Okay, and then I put this in as a built-in pause. Okay, can you use that? Here we are back at the tabernacle. This time, Hannah and Elkanah have their boy in their arms. Eli, the priest we saw earlier, was there again, walking really wide towards them. Hannah says, God answered my prayers. I pledged Samuel to serve God, so he will serve him here with you. Hannah and Elkanah left Samuel with Eli at the tabernacle and headed home. We need to move forward through the Bible story again a little bit. Go back into the crawl position, and we're going to crawl forward again. Try to go a little faster. Samuel grew up at the temple. Every year, Hannah returned with a new robe for Samuel, and God gave Hannah many more children. Now stop crawling and let's see what's happening with Samuel. It's nighttime now. We see Eli talking to his sons. I hear you are sinning. Please stop and be faithful to God. The sons aren't listening. We plug our ears with our fingers like the sons and make a sound. They can't hear Eli because they aren't willing to listen. They won't unplug their ears. That is terrible. How frustrating that must be for Eli. But we see Samuel has grown up and grown in favor with God. Samuel and Eli go to their beds. They lie down and they close their eyes.
Samuel, Samuel.
Here I am. He hops up and runs to Eli's bedside and says, here I am, you called me. But Eli says, I didn't call you, go back to bed. He lays back down.
Samuel, Samuel.
Here I am. He hops up and runs to Eli's bedside and says, here I am, you called me. But Eli says, my son, I did not call you. For a third time, he lies back down.
Samuel, Samuel.
Here I am. He hops up and runs to Eli's bedside and says, here I am, you called me. But Eli says, go and lie down. And if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" Samuel lay back down.
Samuel, Samuel.
"Speak, for your servant is listening."
See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears about it tingle. The guilt of Eli's house will never be atoned for by sacrifice or offering.
Samuel was very worried. He didn't want to tell Eli that God had said Eli's son's sins wouldn't be forgiven. He knew it would make Eli sad. He clasps both his fingers behind his back and bows down to Eli, letting his hands fall forward a little. But Eli asked, "Tell me what God said to you." Samuel is sad because he knows he must tell the truth. He tells Eli everything. Is Eli going to flip out at Samuel? What's going to happen? Samuel thinks Eli will be angry. He lifts one foot up and lifts his hands over his face. Eli's face looks crushed, but instead of getting mad at Samuel and God, he says, "He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes." God continued to be with Samuel as he grew up, and Samuel continued to share God's plan with the nation of Israel. It's time to end our story today. We come to our knees and toes, and we close our eyes. We smile because in today's story, Hannah got her baby Samuel, and God ended up using Samuel to communicate his plans with all of Israel. We open our eyes. Thanks for joining me today, Calvary kids. Today we learned that God used Hannah's son, Samuel, to share God's plan. He used God's words to tell people what God is like. Eventually, Jesus told the world about God's plan and showed them what God is like. Our memory verse for this unit is, "Lord, there is no one like you. You are great. Your name is great in power." That's Jeremiah 10, verse 6. This is the stance that Eli the priest had when he heard the bad news about his sons. Instead of reacting with anger, he recognized that God is great and does good even when it is hard for us to understand. Try to find 3 things this week that God is doing that is really, really good, and share them with a friend or a parent. Have a wonderful week, Calvary kids. Bye.